because it was too scary. And I only started again because of the new lanes.
Yeah.
But I stay in those protected lanes most of the time.
Yeah. Okay.
I have my roots.
You're prudent, you're vigilant.
It's better since 2 years now.
I've been doing it since, well, since COVID was over.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to do, this is the second talk in a series we're doing with Camille and Eric, the owners of Habile. The topics have so far explored themes that are obviously both close to us personally and also their business, because they're both in food and clothing and fashion production, Camille being a designer, Eric being a chef. So the first talk looked at what's behind what we eat, so the value of food and how we attribute what is worth a certain price. And fashion/goods seem to be the next logical topic of conversation, particularly given that we have just experienced Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We're heading into the holidays where by some estimates we waste 25% more in overconsumption, excess, products that just never end up being sold off or end up in landfills or end up whatever. This is a time of extreme excess. And so I thought this is a perfect time to talk about consumerism and also how that pertains to fashion. So we're joined by two very, very prominent individuals in this space, Dana Thomas, who's a best-selling author of Fashionopolis, which if you haven't read and you're interested in the topic of ethical and sustainable fashion, it's a Bible, Fashionopolis, which came out a couple of years ago, but still was now since translated in adapted into a teen edition. So there's been updated information.
Young readers.
Young readers, sorry, that's the proper term. And she is also—
And in French.
And in French.
German. Russian, Chinese, and I can't remember what else. Polish.
Okay, so there's a version for everyone essentially, and she's a regular contributor to the New York Times, British Vogue, Regular Vogue, Elle, all of the publications, but really an expert on this theme of basically the products, even jewelry also sometimes, right?
Sometimes,
but mostly
it's a very specialized bead.
Sure. And Adeline Dargent, who is in charge of sustainability projects within the Fédération française du prêt-à-porter, so a very important French organization supporting the fashion and design arts within the country. So I wanted to start by asking, Dana, your work has really gone obviously into fast fashion. I mean, in the book, you're really deciphering the dangers and the impact of fast fashion, but also its multi-pronged effects, right? So there's obviously the damaging aspect on the planet, but also human rights violations, the labor exploitation. But you still say that there are reasons to remain hopeful. What do you still feel that way since you published the book a couple of years ago?
Absolutely. Actually, when I was working on the book, my agent would call in, check in with me every once in a while, and then say at the end, remember, it's the book of hope. It can't be too much of a downer. I was like, right. And when I did a fellowship in the Catskills, and I read one of the chapters, and we did readings for each other at this fellowship in the evenings after dinner, and I read, and one of my colleagues from Kenya said, I thought this was supposed to be the book of hope. And I was like, right. And I sat up till 2 in the morning rewriting the chapter and cutting out all the downer part, because there is hope. And I actually have a podcast now called The Green Dream, which I call the Podcast of Hope, and a newsletter that goes with it. The idea is that you can either look, I'm an optimist, not a pessimist. I like to look at that glass being half full. So there is a lot of bad news about sustainability, not just in fashion, but across the board. I mean, Elizabeth Colbert, we love her at the New Yorker, but if I read one more piece about the world is on fire and we're all going to die, I'm just throwing away the magazine. So I try to instead point out the good news, because there is good news on every front. Davis Wallace Wells just reported that we're damage is a lot less than we thought it would be when scientists predicted where we are now 10 years ago. Really? And he's saying, weirdly, because of COVID, and then more importantly, because of the war in Ukraine, which sounds like a terrible, like how to take a lemon and sort of turn it into lemonade, that it's pushing us to consume greener energy and build in the infrastructures for greener energy faster, because we have these limits that we can't, there's less gas, there's less everything, so we have to pivot faster. And we can see, you see the city, there's bicycling, we see there's way more electric cars, so it's happening in every regard, but in the fashion industry it's happening because of consumer pressure, which is super important, because there's the whole generation of Gen Zs who have been raised, vegan fast food, we were living at McDonald's when I was their age, and also really caring about everything that they spend their money on and the companies that they are going to, that they're patronizing. They want them to be stand-up companies. This morning, the reason I was late was because I was doing live radio about the Balenciaga uproar. And while that's not about sustainability, it is about human rights in a sense, more than human rights. It's about children's rights. And and last night I was on Instagram at midnight before going to sleep, which is a note, not the thing you should do. And all I saw was a lot of red X's, Balenciaga, canceled. And they're having a crisis meeting as we speak to figure out how to sort this out after 2 apologies. So this generation really has power, and they are pushing fashion to be greener. Now, there's a lot of greenwashing, but they're also being called out on that, the brands. And then the other thing is legislation is pushing brands to be more responsible, and this is an important pivot that's also coming fast. So we are seeing cleaner textiles, cleaner production. Human rights, you wish it were better. But it could get better in that the EU's looking into putting in legislation saying that everything that's imported into the EU meets EU factory rules. So you have to pay your workers well, treat them well, and make sure they're in a safe environment. Things like that, legislation like that will be enormous if it happens European-wide, because then everybody has to adapt or they lose an entire market. And we're seeing also more reusing of clothes, and because of just economics in the end, less overproduction. There's still too much overproduction by a lot. But then there's people like me, but lots of kid reporters who are like Energizer bunnies, these kids, who are going out and finding, disasters, environmental disasters caused by the fashion industry, reporting on them, and they're making headlines around the world, which is causing more backlash and changes. The greatest one being the dunes of clothes that were discovered a year ago in the Atacama Desert of Chile, where 20% of the clothes produced are disposed of before they ever hit the retail floor. And a lot of them were winding up in this desert, which you would think is pristine and is not. And unfortunately then, because they got called out on it, they burned all those textiles, and all those toxic fumes caused an environmental disaster.
Which Burberry got in trouble for years ago for burning.
Yeah, and shredding. But this was like a massive burning, so then all these local villagers had respiratory issues. It's just a mess.
But in France now it's forbidden.
It's forbidden
because of a law.
Exactly.
AGEC law.
And hopefully that law will also go European-wide. Like it's almost like a test case in France, and if it works, then they're going to adopt it in other countries. Britain's been doing certain things that if it works, they're going to get adopted. And so between social pressure and legislation, companies and the economic realities of today, it's bad business to overproduce. It's a waste of money, and they're calling in McKinsey saying, where can we cut the fat in our companies? And the first thing McKinsey's going to say is stop overproducing and throwing away stuff. So we're seeing, from outside pressures, a pivot inside. Brands generally will, not just fashion brands, but any company won't change the way they do business if it works for them. Because it costs money to change the way you do business. But if they see an economic or social impact that's positive, then they'll change, or they're forced to. So we're seeing it.
But so one of the things, you brought up some greenwashing, and in your book you said that fashion has in particular tiptoed into the realm of sustainability. I mean, obviously it feels like it's more prominent now, but it really was more of like a, you know, dipping your toe in.
Yeah.
And
because why change what works?
Right. And so a lot of what we still see, I think, is greenwashing from and not just fashion brands, but cosmetics. And for the consumer, I think it's getting harder. There's like all this information, but it's harder to ascertain what is real and truly ethical and sustainable and what is just sort of posturing. So how do you recommend consumers can educate themselves? This is the hard thing.
Read my column in British Vogue. And listen to my podcast and read my newsletter. No, more importantly, there are different associations and governments that are coming up with seals of approval. There hasn't been one yet, but I feel like one major one will surface. And that will be sort of your sign that this is good, right? Like the wool one or the recycle one, we're going to get the recycle one for fashion at some point, but we have to see which one's going to surface. And there's a lot of different sort of good housekeeping seals versions for the fashion industry. But then retailers like Net-a-Porter or Matches Fashion, they do green edits now, where you can just go shop in that area and they've done the due diligence for you. Thank goodness. Now, some of it's still...
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How can you be sure that they're doing it?
There's a hilarious website called greenwashing.com, I think. And it goes after fashion brands and finds an outfit that they say is green, and then they dissect it. And they're like, how can this be green? It has plastic sequins, it has stretch elastine in the fabric, it's got an acetate lining, and they just call out brands for these things. So there are some watchdogs, which is really good. But it's hard to sift through. I write a lot in the book about Stella McCartney. She is pretty straight up, but not because it's simply the right thing to do. It's how she was raised. I mean, she's the daughter of two of the most famous hippies of all time, right? So this is how she's raised, and this has been her way of producing fashion since she started. She said, no animals, no fur, and then she went into, let's not harm the planet in any way if we can avoid it. So drastically, use green materials and follow our supply chain. But it's not easy to find those, and it's not always cheap. But you can do simple things like keep re-wearing your clothes. Today I'm wearing a turtleneck that I got in the 1990s from Gucci. Okay, the sweater's 25 years old. If you wear something 50 times, I think it's been reported, or decided by scientists, then it's carbon neutral. Well, I do that by March. So, by March. Every year. We're up to probably 5,000 times. So, keep wearing your things, repair them, buy resale, rent when it's a special occasion. One of the most interesting markets I find is the rental of wedding dresses. I mean, there's something we wear once and then we either, pack up and put in the attic. I wore my mother's, so it got worn twice. And I told my daughter, you can have it. She's like, I don't want a 1950s dress. I said, you take it to the tailor and you make whatever you want with that gorgeous fabric and embroidery. Just let's keep things in circulation. And that's how the consumer can actually be green without having to worry about research. And it's just be more conscious, cherish things you have, and go for pre-loved, as we call it.
But does that work? Because one of the big critiques I'm seeing also even on Instagram and Twitter is these people who say, well, I want to buy green brands, but it's always more expensive. So how are people who have very limited budgets supposed to do this? And I think it's sort of, that's not even the issue at that point. Then it comes into need versus want at a certain point.
Absolutely. And the thing about, I'm going to say like a really radical thing here, but the thing about I can't afford to pay more for clothes. You actually can. We have been conditioned to believe that cheap clothes are normal. They are not normal. If something looks too cheap too good to be true, its price, it's because it is. If you're paying $20 for a dress, that means the person who made it was probably paid 20 cents. And they're living in appalling conditions. Only 98% of the workforce in the fashion industry is not paid a living wage. It might be less than that now because of legislation. But you know, and the suppliers aren't paid what they're worth. The farmers aren't paid what they're worth. Nobody along that supply chain is paid what they're worth. And by you buying into this, you're perpetuating this, including you not being paid what you're worth. Therefore, you're not earning. That's why you don't have more money to spend on clothes. It's all of a piece. And you're greenlighting the idea that bosses, companies, shareholders can pay people not what they're worth in order to produce anything, not just clothes. And you're basically hurting yourself. A generation ago, we bought 5 times less clothing. Today we buy 5 times more clothing than we did 30 years ago. And in that total purchase of 5 times more clothing, so I'm getting 5 instead of 1, I'm paying a total of 1/5 what I spent 30 years ago. So that just shows you clothes have never been cheaper than they are today. And we can afford more. We used to give in that, you know, those pies that shows how much you spend in your household. Yeah. And it says like so much for utilities, so much for mortgage or rent, so much for food. There was the clothing slice, right? And a generation ago, it was in the double digits, sort of, I can't remember exactly, but 15, 16, 17, maybe 21%. A fair amount of the pie. Now it's down in the low single digits. We spend less on clothes. We
in terms of total spend.
Total spend of our household budget than we did a generation ago by about 1/5. We spend 1/5 of what we did. So if it's 4% now, it was 20% a generation ago. And we have 5 times more clothes.
So that's very disturbing.
You can actually pay more for clothes. We've just been conditioned to think we shouldn't.
Well, and also there are the people who, you know, if they wanted to buy something, if their family needs a shirt or a sweater, I mean, they could go for the used. And I think there's also this element of status, like I need something new because otherwise I think when I was a kid, among my classmates, I didn't want to be the one who had, hand-me-downs from my sister, right? So there's this whole image.
Or going to outlets.
Right, or going to outlets, exactly.
Now, but then there's things like my daughter, who's 22 and is wearing my blue jeans that I kept from the 1980s because I kept thinking I'd fit back in them. And they were really good jeans in the 80s that you saved up to buy. You only had 2 or 3 pairs in your closet, one that was super worn out and becoming cutoffs, one that was kind of perfect because you'd broken it in just right because you did the breaking in, you didn't buy them broken in, and then one that you kind of walk like a robot because they were so stiff and it was very uncomfortable to sit. But after a few wears, they started breaking in, right? And I would save up to buy these jeans. They were cheaper then than they are now, like everything. Or they were more expensive now than they are now. And I had to save my money and and now I'm ready to go buy a new pair of jeans. And so they were great jeans, good old 501 Levi's. She's now wearing them. She looks fantastic. And everyone's like, God, those are good jeans.
Right. They were perfect then, they're perfect now.
My daughters do also the same.
And she looks so fashion forward.
Is a good thing.
Yeah.
She looks so fashion forward wearing something that's been sitting in the closet for 30 years.
Well, so that's talking about some of the old, and sort of like retaining what we have. Adeline, you work with emerging brands and designers on sustainability. So I'm curious, sort of like, what does that guidance look like in today's climate, and what are the key issues that designers are worried about?
It's not only emerging brands. It's, because I think it's more simple for emerging brands because they build their business model on sustainability today. But the oldest, it's more difficult to change the business model, to change the chain value, and that's why we work with all brands. And the guidance, the first thing is lobbying, because we are an organization, a professional organization, and there are a lot of mandatories in sustainability in France, even in Europe. But in France, it's we are the best, so we have to do best in fashion.
And plenty of other arenas too, but yes, fashion.
So, we have to make, sorry for my English, the public authorities to understand it takes time. So they want to go on. Because of communication, they want to go faster and faster, but companies need time to go better on sustainability. And we develop tools also, and we have guidelines like responsible sourcing guide, because it's the first thing in fashion, and you said it, human rights and raw materials, and that's the first point.
So you provide sort of like recommended sourcing
and tools to do better.
To understand also how to choose.
Yeah, to do better, and we have some examples of chart or things like that.
Okay.
The second one is the second step on eco-design. We have a guide on eco-design. It's more difficult, but some companies are ready for eco-design. And the last one, it's because of the greenwashing, is a responsible communication guide.
And what does that include? Because, you know, what pushes someone into greenwashing?
Money.
No, I don't mean like what motivates them. I mean, what type of communication falls into greenwashing versus like it's not just the the truth behind the brand. It's also the way they speak, right?
Yeah, perfectly. That's why we address the first public is intern public.
Like the internal fashion community, you mean?
No. In the company. Intern.
In a given brand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because your
employees.
Yeah, your employees have to need to understand what's the value of the brand and what they do. And they have to understand. The second one, it's all shareholders. It can be your bank, your investors, your providers. You have to make them understand, because you have to collect a lot of data from your providers. So they have to understand. And the next step is consumers, of course.
Which seems to be the most challenging. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems that the consumer still wants to be able to behave as they always have.
Yeah, of course.
And brands
like a company.
Like the company. Yeah.
There's so much pressure on the consumers as well.
Well, and that's the big debate now. It's consumers say, well, why should I change anything I'm doing until the big companies and the fossil fuel companies change? But I mean, at a certain point, everyone needs to do their part. So, you know, I'm wondering, you know, there are some companies we know who are resisting some of these, you know, not only greenwashing, but resisting big sales opportunities, right? Patagonia doesn't participate in Black Friday and these big promotions. REI famously also. You have French brands like Veja, which are, you know, radical about this. And I'm sure you've mentioned some of the brands that you work with that are, you know, anti-sales and anti...
a lot of them. And I'm sure you know Julia Faure from Loom. You know her?
A few people, yeah.
Yeah, she's militant and a real militant. Julia Faure, F-A-U-R-E.
Is the brand the one with the Y? L-Y-O-O-U?
It's.
But you know,
L-Y-O-O.
Looms in la marque, and she's in NGO. The name is En mode climat.
But I'm wondering, so do brands like this who take a stance, especially big brands with, you know, huge visibility?
Loom is a small brand.
No, sure. But I mean, if you look at the big ones, does it make a difference in people's overconsumption? Do you think?
No. no, not at the time. Because, you know, H&M, they make a lot of things, they have a lot of actions on sustainability, but the core of business model is also more and more
it's
and more.
about overproduction, overconsumption.
Yeah.
No, they are the #1 greenwasher.
H&M, yeah. But if you look
I think Shein is...
Oh, Shein, yes.
Well, no, but they're not even really they're barely... They hired a guy.
Yeah, they do greenwashing today because...
Yeah.
But they're not even like pretending to be good.
Yeah.
H&M
is like sharing.
Yeah, but also Shein today. They have a second-hand platform now, and they've understood that it's a good way to sell.
The trash quality of fast fashion. Just last week, Vestiaire Collective announced that they weren't going to accept fast fashion as a second-hand product to resell anymore on their platform, saying it has no value.
Yeah, but
so basically, this is a very strong message saying, don't waste your money on this because it has no value. You can unload it on Depop to some other teenager maybe, but beyond that, like you're not going to make your money back. It's not like you're buying something that has, when you resell it, you're selling it for more. Or breaking even. But at the same time, they're basically calling it trash. So I worry that will push people to start throwing clothes in the trash again, which is just a disaster too.
So it's like this is what it feels like. It feels like you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't, right?
It's a tricky.
You either get people to stop buying fast fashion outright, but it's still hard. I mean, I see people, educated people who seem or come across as being very sensitive to these issues, saying, "Oh, I got this at Zara, but I'll keep it a long time." It's like, well, how long can a Zara piece last?
Well, like I said, I kept my jeans 30 years, so maybe.
But those were Levi's; they were already better made.
Right? No, you can't.
You know, like that's the thing.
A CEO once told me. Not CEO, a president of a major company once told me fast fashion never looks better than the first time you wear it. Mm-hmm. The second time it's already looking like and if you wash it, if you wash it, forget about it. And for me, the rule of thumb, it's very simple, is if it costs more to dry clean than you did to pay for it, you did not pay enough, and it's junk. Because if it's too fragile to put in the washing machine, and it was only 20 euros, there's something wrong there.
Right.
Yeah, but it depends. I think it depends. You can find in fast fashion some good products also, and with durability. You have to first. It's the end of the interview, but
we can get to that though.
You have also you must read. When you buy something, you have to read the clever care information, the composition also, to see if it's if you have only polyamide, it's a bad way.
Polyester, nylon.
Polyester, plastic, but you have to look on the composition. And the made in, of course, but it's...
but that's very confusing too, because apparently the made in France can be, you put the button on and then you can say it's made in France. No. Wasn't it? It's the most important transformation for the garment. So it's not only you put some button or it's not. Yeah, but now it's in France we have the law AGEC, and for big brands on the 1st of January next year, on 2023, they have to inform consumers on the traceability. So the made in is mandatory. So the made in,
and made how?
La teinture,
the
colors,
the dye,
and the make of tissues,
the materials,
So 3 steps are obligatory on the it's not on the garment. You can find it on the website or something else with a QR code, and for the 1st January.
The thing is,
and there are also other information like recyclability, like if you you have more than 50% of synthetic fibers in the garment, it make relegate when you wash it. You can relegate some microfibers.
Microfibers, release of.
And on information on toxicity also. So
the question then, of course, is will the consumer take that step? I mean, I know I'm unlike Dana, I'm being a bit pessimistic, but I just worry that people are not going to do those things.
But if you want to know, you will be able to.
But it's more transparent. It's more available.
Yeah.
Because fashion companies, like all companies, this isn't just about fashion, like to hide their dirty secrets, and they don't want you to know that this thing might actually have a terrible impact. And so the government of France has decided, well, we're going to force you to show your hand, basically. And you don't have to look, but if you want to, it's there.
And the next step is a project, also mandatory. It's like, Nutri-Score in food. Normally we will also have something like that in fashion. Yeah, it can be made A, B, C, D. We don't know actually for what is the form, but it will be mandatory in the two next years.
And who's behind that initiative?
Government, French government, and also in Europe, but we don't know if it will be mandatory in Europe. But in France, they want to.
And the Fédération française is champion.
Of course, but it's quite difficult to build the system.
Yeah.
So, obviously the reason we keep shopping is because as humans we derive some form of pleasure from it. Whether it's you get endorphins, you feel like it's filling a gap in your life.
The thrill at the till.
The thrill at the till. And obviously this isn't like a modern phenomenon. This has been true for ages. In the book, you talk about the bon marché and how that changed retail and the shopping experience for people back in the 19th century. So it's not a new thing. But I'm wondering, is it possible to consume, for consumers to buy in a way that's not just not harmful for the environment, but also isn't for themselves, is the excessive shopping, an avoidant strategy? Is it even satisfying the needs that it was supposed to, or set out to fill? So, is there a way to do this in a way that's also less harmful to themselves? And is there a way to train people to really constantly think need versus want?
Right. Is overconsumption a self-harm tactic?
Yeah.
I think it is. And I kind of write that, but delicately. and something I also talked about in my first book, Deluxe, but about luxury and how we've been, wanting to set ourselves apart through fashion since prehistoric times. This is in our human nature. But I mean, there's an aspect that's very compulsive, and when called out on it, people sort of are surprised by the idea that this could be a weird compulsion. I have a friend who has, sort of 50 gray pullovers. I'm like, why do you have 50? Well, every shade is different. No, it's not.
50.
You have a compulsion issue, my friend. You need to address that.
Or even just the idea that if it's not new anymore, it's not worth it.
There was an amazing story. I don't remember if I got it in the book or not. Of an exchange student, a Chinese exchange student, who was living with a family in, I want to say, New Zealand. And it was New Zealand. And they kept, after a few weeks, the people were like, you never do laundry. Like, what's the deal? You never do laundry. And she said, no, I wear everything once and then I throw it away and then I go shopping again.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And that for her and where she came from in China, this was absolutely 100% normal behavior because, again, we've been conditioned to think that this is normal behavior. And also, one thing you have to remember with the Chinese culture, which is a very important aspect, is that for nearly a century, it was closed off from the West. And when I first went there in 2004, when it was already open, had been open for about 15 years, a large portion of the population, once you got outside of Shanghai and Beijing, were still wearing the blue Mao suits, which are kind of the equivalent of the travail bleu en France. But they didn't have fashion for much of the 20th century. So now they're overcompensating because it's like, hey, now we can do this. Isn't this great? And there's a whole generation that's been raised by people who are excited about this. And so they completely think it's normal. And are surprised when you call them out on it. So that's, again, it's just about conditioning, and it's about social cues and social practices. But yes, it's also, in some places, it's a sign of compulsive behavior, like it could be overeating, over drinking, over smoking, over exercising.
It's an example of overconsumption in general.
Yeah, but it's difficult to tell them don't overconsumption, because it's something normal, and for we have also overconsumption, on a trop consommé, and to tell them today, no, you don't have to do this because of the planet, and it's quite difficult.
Well, it's because of us that they can't.
We have also done it.
At the same time, I was doing, one of our guests from the first talk, she's French-Tunisian and works on, she does her own olive oil brand. And what she was saying, she was explaining sort of the way Tunisians feel. They're just starting to get certain big brands and certain fast fashion, and they want that because they feel like they haven't had that opportunity yet.
And they buy into the marketing.
They buy into the marketing, whereas people from Europe want to go and live like the villagers in Tunisia and live a simple life, and that's luxury. And there's this disconnect between, you know, what is valuable to people. And so I think that's something also you can't underestimate, is the people who are, or the cultures who are on a different sort of timeline, development timeline than us.
And the marketing departments make sure that their message reaches that new demographic.
Do the designers and brands you work with feel like they can still create and pursue fashion as an art within this context of, you know, being careful and being more mindful?
Yeah, it's quite difficult because it's an international value chain, and it's complex, and it's difficult for a small brand to know all the value chain, and to do better, it has to know all the value chain, but some.
And what is part of the value chain? Just for people who don't know what that.
The value chain. I told it about it's confection, dyeing, and until the fiber. But until the fiber, you have 5 steps.
Okay.
So it's difficult to go to the fiber, but it's the best to know. So they have to work with labels and certifications. In cotton, you can have GOTS or something like that, but it's more expensive for them. And it's difficult also today because of the inflation. So, and to find local sourcing, because it's more expensive to work with French
like workshop or production facility.
And it depends also on les capacities, abilities of workspace.
Okay.
So it's difficult.
So then trying to create within that framework. Do they feel like there's a future for this sort of fashion as an art form? Or maybe that's not what they're thinking at all.
No. It's they think about that.
They do.
It's very, very important. And some creative people think it's difficult. It's j'ai retrouvé mes notes parce que j'avais. J'avais des choses intéressantes là-dessus et ce sera plus facile. Let's see. Because it's for some people it's difficult to think eco design because when it's more difficult to you have less choice in raw materials and you have to create less models too because the problem is more and more models create envy. So you have to create less. So it's operating with
when
less.
Stella McCartney, I talked to Stella McCartney about this. She said, I love sequins. I love sequins. Who doesn't love sequins? But there's only one sequin that isn't made of plastic. That's biodegradable. So that means I have one sequin to work with instead of millions and millions of all the different colors and sizes. Yeah. Somebody is expanding that. There's a company that's making sequins out of seaweed, which is cool. So there are lots of great startups doing interesting things. There's a woman I write about in my book, Sarah Bellows, who's doing natural indigo in Nashville, outside of Nashville. And when I met with her in 2016, I can't believe it's been that long already, she said, if I can get 1% of the indigo market, that would be enormous. This is dyed probably with conventional indigo, because at the time I saw her, it was 99.9% of all denim was dyed with chemical indigo, and she was bringing natural indigo back. It's beautiful, it's clean, and it's good for the soil because indigo is like soybeans. It puts nitrogen back in the soil, and she's doing so well now with this business. She's worked out a deal with Levi's to bring natural indigo into the global supply chain. Wow! So she might actually wind up with 10% in the not too distant future and so it's, and she did that in 5 years with COVID in the middle. So there are a lot of startups doing interesting things and getting liftoff very quickly because there is such a demand for it from the creative side.
Yeah, but for young brands, it's very expensive to work on this subject, and return on investment is long.
And the beauty of it is when a company like Levi's embraces this,
by Levi's,
then the price, then it becomes more affordable for everybody else because they've actually put in a lot of money into the making this work and brings, it's like everything else, then the price comes down. So there are companies, startups that are starting to really, mycelium for handbags, so it's made out of mushroom root systems. And Stella McCartney's been helping supporting Bolt Threads as they did all this R&D to get to the point, and then she unveiled her first handbag in July, and it's going to be for sale more in her collection that's coming out in March. And she's basically said, if you build it, I will use it. And that then when it gets more and more used by brands like Stella McCartney, then they've got the machines to make it, and they build a factory as opposed to a workshop, and then they're producing enough for anyone to be able to afford to get it. But it takes a while to get there. The good news is that a lot of this R&D was being done during COVID. Like you could still do that. So they kind of got ahead of the game while the rest of the industry was at a standstill.
Now, the other element, and I read this in another book, someone who used to work at Hypebeast, Alec Leach, I don't know if you know he did this book, which I have with me if anyone wants to see it, but it's basically just like a little manifesto of, the planet is burning, but we're still buying shoes, is what it's called. And one of the things he says, he criticizes the hype machine.
Well, I mean, a good pair of shoes will lift your mood.
Some retail there. It just might not help the planet. But and he criticizes the hype machine, right? Like getting and that like creating this need for these limited edition things. And you could say that the sneaker drop is part of this, streetwear, influence this, is getting, it played a role in getting people hooked into this like relentless cycle of newness and buying more for the sake of, just owning a piece of that newness. So how can we break this cycle? I mean, if brands aren't going to do it, how can consumers sort of say to themselves, like, this is sick, I don't need to be participating in this? I know that's like an existential question at this point, but just
well, that's why I wrote the book.
You have
right. Yeah. Well, if you present people with facts, you'd think that, but
and we're turning it into a documentary.
You are.
So we'll roll it out even to a broader audience like people who don't read. So hopefully we'll just keep, you just
reaching people.
And I'm writing it in Vogue.
Yeah.
Which is huge that Vogue has given me this platform to say, basically, consume more consciously, be aware, and buy less, buy better. That's our hashtag, buy less, buy better. And then of course the rest of magazines like buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this.
Well, that's the problem, right? Like that, I think for a consumer.
But they give me an opening page saying, before you consider everything that's in this magazine, have a think, please.
I don't know, though. Is that asking too much, though, of the consumer to like...
It has to start somewhere.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I don't think so.
Start somewhere.
Right. You can, so it's for companies, they make to, the hype is timeless products, finally.
Are they?
There are some of them, yes.
Kanye shoes are timeless?
Well, not now. But
not now.
But that drives sales.
Patagonia.
Well, Patagonia has become sort of like hyped recently, right? Because of their messaging. But I'm just thinking about the brands that, Supreme, for example, where people are, stomping all over each other in the street to get, 100 shirts that they make, for this drop. And,
Well, happily, there's only 100.
It's a bit...
See? True. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're fighting the hope. I guess I'm very pessimistic, but... Okay, so basically the consumers
and I can mention some brands. You have Asphalt. It's a French men brand, and you have the perfect suite. In Patin, you have the perfect T-shirt, the perfect jean. But
that's it.
That's it. Yeah. For Patin, she only have Patin.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
She only have sex products, but the best.
6 products, but the best.
Six products, but the best.
Well, also here, Camille, you do
and
unisex.
Abil, of course.
Thanks.
But like well-made.
Yeah, but I think just to reply as a brand is a new challenge. Like it's just do less, but what you do has to be better.
That's it. Buy less, buy better.
And you take more time, but at least you are more proud of what you're doing, and you know that your customer will be back. Not to rebuy a new one because it's great. It's just like, for example, the families, they all have the jacket. Like there are 10 of them, and they're just proud to have the same jacket because they know that they will keep it a long time. So I think it's just another part of your spirit. It's just, I don't want to buy more. I just want to buy like a new friend or a jacket or clothes that I can leave something with.
Right.
That's why you can see in our clothes we write "Together is for life." Because for us, it's like you don't want to lose your best friend as you don't want to lose your best jacket. So I think you just have to put emotion on your clothes than just addiction. I think it's just,
Well, and I think, I would say that probably social media has so many ills. And if you look at, not that I love that TikTok exists, but it's been interesting to observe the way people have catapulted certain brands, including in the beauty space, because I'd say it's almost even more palpable in beauty, but the way they just, they go nuts. They buy something that they've seen on TikTok, and then they, the impulse. There's like no moment of reflection. It's sort of like, I've seen this, I've seen 25 people talk about it, and therefore I buy it, which I guess was the same as with magazines so many years ago. But it just feels so impulsive now in a way that, it's like, if we don't break this, if someone doesn't break this cycle,
TikTok makes the success of Shein.
Yeah.
Well, everything's in your fingertips before you had to like process going to the store.
Right.
Money.
Right.
Here it's like you don't even really feel. It's like, oh, I want it. Right. It's all direct and it's immediate. You don't have to like have that walk to the shop with the bus ride, then the train, then the.
But I don't know. Anyway, so I don't want to end on bad notes.
No,
but I'm curious about both of you personally obviously are in this space. You're passionate about it. How have your own behaviors changed? Obviously, we know you've kept sweaters for 25 years, which is awesome.
And I have a hole in the bottom of my shoe. I have to take my shoes to the, and what I'm going to do is take my shoes to the cobbler and get them resold. Yeah.
So,
and I've worn them so much that in 1 year I got a hole in the bottom.
Okay.
Because I basically have one great pair of shoes that I just live in.
So have your behaviors then changed in any other way, would you say? Or the way you maybe think about it?
And I even, after this, you know what I'm doing? I'm going to Christian Louboutin to pick up some sandals I bought in the 1990s that I'm having them restore.
Oh, good.
Because I figured if I spent that much on a pair of Christian Louboutins that I love, let's keep them alive. And they're like, God, these are fabulous, but they're really beat up. I'm like, yeah, and you're going to make them look good again, aren't you? So it's not just me who's changed that, but I mean, Christian Louboutin did not have a refurbishment store before, and he had a makeup store there instead, which I wrote about. And then suddenly I learned that he has a cobbler, and you can take your beautiful Louboutins back and get them restored. So you may have paid a lot of money for them the first time around, but here it is 25 years later, and I'm going to get a second 25 years out of those shoes. That's a long time for a pair of shoes.
Right.
So how has my behavior changed? I think about organic cotton.
Yeah, I actually think about that now all the time because
I buy organic cotton shirts, and I'm really happy when I do because they feel great against my skin. They keep their shape. They last longer.
Can you tell people why
they're gorgeous?
Non-organic cotton is so terrible?
Oh, I mean, the short version is
in like a sentence. What is that?
The short version is that it takes for conventional cotton, which is the opening of the book.
Yeah.
1 kilo of cotton requires 1 kilo of chemicals to just grow it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Organic cotton requires 0 chemicals. I mean, if you just start there. And it's not just pesticides and herbicides, it's also defoliants, because it's easier to pick cotton when all the leaves have fallen off the bushes. But I have a whole chapter on cotton, but that's the short version.
Okay.
And that doesn't even include the human rights part, which is really terrible too, with the Uyghurs and in China. So you don't even know if that cotton has been farmed by slave labor, and 1/5 of the cotton today is farmed by slave labor in China. But if you go for organic, it's not going to be from that region. Organic's only 1%, I think, of all cotton.
Yeah, it's not so much.
But if you find it, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And people say, I can't afford to spend money on good, organic or sustainably sourced items. But a good cotton shirt is still not an expensive item. So I have one that I love. It's a tuxedo shirt on top. It's really beautiful, by a company called Careful. Care, C-A-R-E, and then full, F-U-L-L. Gorgeous shirt. And I think I paid 125 pounds for it. That shirt at H&M in junky conventional cotton or Zara would have probably been 75, right? So I paid basically 50% more, but that shirt's going to last me the rest of my life. And it looks so much better, and it feels good. It's nicer on the skin. And don't we care about things like that? Yes, of course we care about things like that. How does it feel? It makes you feel good. It makes you feel good in your heart, makes you feel good physically, and it makes you look good. So, buying an organic cotton shirt may set you back. It may be $50 instead of 10 or 15, but I have one that I will probably be buried in. It's such a great t-shirt. It's so well made, so solid, so thick, so soft. I wear it constantly. I mean, that 50 wear rule I wore out after I crossed it after 2 months. That one's Alabama Channon. Out of Alabama Channon, out of Florence, Alabama. And so I've worn it more than if I had 5 conventional cotton t-shirts, they would have all worn out and been tossed in the trash. And I'm still wearing this one and it still looks fabulous and brand new. So I think organic cotton is an easy way to go green in the way you dress that doesn't break the bank and actually has a really positive impact on the industry, because the more we buy it, the more they plant, the more they grow.
And then,
but Chinese market keep it on their market. That's a problem for companies.
And so, what about you? How have you tried to, or how have your habits changed?
No more impulsive buying.
Okay.
The first one.
No more
impulsive buying.
Right.
That's the first one. I've already said I check all claims, because it's important to know what you buy, and durable products, because I have to keep it long time and to give to my daughters for the second hand or something like that.
And do your daughters want to take over your?
Yes,
my gosh,
of course.
Lucy cannot wait to get into my 90s Gucci. Are you kidding?
Yeah, but I don't have.
Are you kidding? Now that Tom Ford Gucci is back in fashion, she's like, what's that suit?
Yeah, but unfortunately for mine, I don't have Gucci.
No, but you have. But they're interested in at least taking over.
Even in Levi's, my husband Levi's, he gives them. Yeah.
Ah, okay. All right.
And she repairs it and make.
So that's the other thing: repairing, refurbishing.
And I think repairing is a very important thing.
And you can do visible mending. You know, like how the Japanese use gold glue to fix a vase, so you can actually see where it broke, but then it's like you honored it in a way. You can do visible mending, like just get some colored yarn. I grew up in the 70s with hippie school teachers, right? And they always had visible mending. Like they took their jeans and they like did all this really beautiful embroidery. And that was before YouTube, when you can like dial it up and learn how to do it by watching it on your computer. It's fun, and it's good for the soul to be working with your hands. So visible mending, like just own it.
And upcycling is a good way to.
Well,
you can find some upcycling brands.
We didn't talk about also the sort of the excess of the resale market, because maybe not vestiaire, but certainly Vinted and Depop and all of those. It's like in the end, they're just like young people are like, oh, cool, I'll buy this, I'll wear this for a month, and then I'll resell it. But because they're not expensive goods to begin with, it's sort of like it ends up in the garbage anyway. But I like this idea of at least that people are open to wearing pre-loved, pre-used
Absolutely.
things.
I mean, yesterday I get a newsletter from the fashion critic for Harper's Bazaar called Opulent Tips. And she always puts things that she finds. I mean, how she has time to do all this searching on Etsy and The Real. I'm like, I can't even keep up with email, but she does. And she had put up something that she said, you must buy this. And by the time I looked at it, somebody had. It was a Martin Margiela by Martin Margiela on The Real for $325. And it was so beautiful. A little black cocktail dress with a fluffy hem, kind of Audrey Hepburn-ish, but Margiela'd. And I thought, right, I got to go on The Real more often and have an alert from Martin Margiela, because this is $325 is what you would pay probably for the similar dress at Zara, and it's Martin Margiela. Not right. Well, and so it's gonna.
Zara. I don't know if anything costs over. A
really good cocktail dress for this holidays. They're up to $250 to $300 now.
If not at Zara, at Sandro and Maj, all of them, they're just as bad. I mean,
now they also have all these premium.
Yeah.
Right.
For the same as
right.
Close to.
So I like this. Just to recap. Try to avoid the impulse purchase.
Oh, and a blog editor told me a great trick for this, which is I try to share all the time. If you're internet shopping, whatever it is, doesn't have to be just fashion, put the little, I love this thing, little heart, and let it sit for a week.
Yeah,
one whole week.
Yeah.
And go back after a week. And if you still have the heart, you still want it, then buy it.
Okay.
And that's how you're at least in internet shopping, avoiding the impulse purchase. Yeah. If you can wait a week for it, because it's not something you need now, then have a think, basically. I call it having a green think, and then go back and you'll be surprised. You might be like, you know what, maybe it wasn't for me, or maybe it absolutely positively is and it needs to be in my life forever.
Yeah, and it's on a long time, not for a short moment.
Yeah, not like I'll wait an hour. You need to put some time in there.
Yeah, the week.
Yeah,
thing.
a full week.
A week.
I usually think that if something happens to the internet and the sale doesn't go through, there's a reason for that, and so I just let it die.
Wasn't meant to be.
It wasn't meant to be, and I'm just like, well, the internet says it wasn't. This was not the thing I needed to buy. So, but I will say that your book and the reporting that you and other young reporters in the U.S. I'm seeing. I think oh gosh, what is her name?
Jasmine?
No, you know another one.
Whitney?
No, another one. Aislinn? No, not Aislinn. She has Eco Cult.
Oh.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
Okay. You're sort of...
Aja. No,
that's Aja Barber, but she also does a good job too. But anyway, there's like a unit of you.
Yeah, there's a unit.
You should be...
Like
you need to be cloned.
Me and my I call them the kids because I'm not young anymore, so I can do that. And they all say, I read your book, usually it was deluxe, and I decided I needed to be like this. And then they scoop me. And I'm like, I had one moment where there was somebody who went and found a Louis Vuitton factory in Romania when Louis Vuitton swore that they didn't produce anywhere but France and Italy. And she went to Romania and stood out front and talked to workers and it was a Louis Vuitton factory and did this whole piece and it ran in the Guardian. I was like, holy camoli, I got totally scooped on that. And then she wrote to me and said that she was a student at St. Martin's. I first read that and I'm like, oh my God. And on top I got scooped by a student. And she said, and I did this because I was so inspired by what you do. I want to do what you do. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is a compliment. It's not a scoop.
No, it is a compliment. It is a compliment.
But the competitive nature of me was like, okay, well, right.
No.
But then I realized, there's a whole generation of kids. I was the only one doing it for a long time, and now there's a whole generation of kids.
But this is huge that there's even a group of you because it needs to happen,
And the reason I did it was because I worked for Newsweek for 15 years, where we weren't beholden to the advertisers in the fashion industry, which gave me the freedom to do what I do.
Which is also something people need to think about when they look at magazines and they see the advertisers and then they wonder why there are so many, articles or product placements from those brands. I mean, that's also the way the media landscape continues to work. So you're right. In that sense, it's very impressive that British Vogue gives you that column. But hopefully the readers are also saying, yes, I'm going to align myself with what Dana says and ignore all this overbuying.
Or wait a week.
Or wait a week. Thank you both so much for coming to talk about these things.
We have a question.
Questions. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to thank them first for taking the time and, obviously read this. And then, she has a young reader edition. So if you have young people in your life who should read this, get that. It's
at the American Library if you're a member.
And for Hope, sustainability in all school, management school, is more and more important. Okay. That's a good way.
Mm-hmm. Good. Questions?
Yes, my question is, as a brand, and you guys are talking about overconsumption. I'm in homewares, but I'm sure it's the same for most fashion brands. Is minimums that make it a problem for us brands. I have to order a certain amount of things, which are sort of sitting in the storage right now that I can't sell yet. So I'm sure that fashion brands have a similar issue where the factories give us minimums and we have no choice but to order a ridiculous amount of things that we don't really need at the moment.
I recently wrote about this in the fashion industry. LVMH has created a thing called Nonasource. And Nonasource is a library of leftover fabrics that they cleaned out their warehouse. So again, sustainability motivated by doing good business. They found that they had warehouses full of all these leftover fabrics, bolts of fabrics that nobody was touching for 15, 20 years, but were still beautiful.
A trade.
And they decided to make a whole library out of it. There's one here in Paris at the Gazelle, and there's one in London now at Mills Fabrica next to St. Pancras train station at King's Cross. And it is open to either LVMH designers who suddenly say, you know what, let's make a couple one-off pieces, like let's make some special pieces out of this beautiful fabric there's only so much of. But more importantly, it's available to young designers who are just starting out and only want to make 20 pieces or 30 pieces. And that's all that they can because that's the kind of size of their company. That's what their retailers are ordering from them. They'll say, okay, we'll take 5 of those if you're going to make 5 of them because you have a short run of fabric. And it's up to 1/3 the price of the original fabric, and they can get the minimum is whatever's available, as opposed to having to order 100 meters and they're not going to use 100 meters. So it's using waste, it's keeping things in circulation, it's helping young designers create and afford to create things without going bankrupt, and it's giving them the freedom to use more beautiful materials without having to put in these minimums for massive amounts of fabric. And I'm sorry that they're the only ones doing it, but I feel like they're not going to be the only ones doing it. I feel like Kering's going to get to it, and Prada's going to get to it, and Gucci, this is going to become a thing because it's a really smart thing. And it's helping this young generation, which, may eventually go work for their companies.
But what you're saying is for linens, right?
Yeah, for linens. I mean,
homeware designers for linens can use Nona Source too if they're startups.
Yeah, because even for the linens, and I'm doing a small run of caftans made out of my linens, but still, it's just like I used to not have a minimum, and then around the middle of COVID, they gave me a minimum and increased all the prices.
Right. So, but for everybody.
But yeah, she said the yarns, the yarns prices were
right, everything.
Everybody was like, okay, but can you let up on the minimums? And she's like, no.
It's because they had leftovers.
God.
They had inventory.
Yeah. So the minimums are massive.
Yeah. What are they? What would a minimum be?
I have to order, so with one factory, I have to order 50 tablecloths per color, per weight.
That's massive.
That's huge. Yeah.
When they're folded, they're like this big. They're huge. And, I'm paying so much for them. So much that I actually didn't order any for this winter. I'm just going to sell napkins because it's easier for me. I can't afford that. I can't afford 50 in one color, and I have 13 colors. So I started this with 13 colors. And then when I checked other factories, when I go to PV, most of the minimums, because I want to start doing prints.
What's PV?
PV
Premier Vision.
The trade show.
Which I write about in the book.
The most important in the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in Paris.
Sorry, what?
And
Premier Vision.
It's the largest
twice a year
fabric show in the world. And it's out near Charles de Gaulle.
And I do linen. I chose linen because it is very incredibly sustainable material.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Rain-fed.
It uses no water. It's just rain. It's like wine. There's good years and bad years for it. No pesticides. And they use it tip to tail. But in addition, most factories want 200 meters per color, and I'm like, what am I going to do with 200 meters of fabric?
Go to Nona Source. Go to Nona Source. Because you can use it for homewares and decor as well.
The other one is Uptrade.
Okay, Uptrade. Okay, yeah. Because for me,
and with Uptrade, we have a problem with Nona Source, a problem of traceability because of
because it's been sitting in a warehouse for 20 years.
Yeah, and it's from luxury. Sometimes it's quite difficult. With Uptrade, you have all traceability.
Okay. I'm going to check that out because I've started to resell some of my linens, at least to sort of give me one, it's income, two, it's stuff that's sitting in factories in my warehouse. It's been used for rental, and maybe no one's rented that color anymore. So I'm just gonna. I created a drop down on the site where you can buy some of the they're all in great condition. But yeah, the minimums are killing me with the factories. So I don't know what years though.
Yeah, but it's very difficult for young brands. So
Did you have a question?
Yeah. So I have a question for each of you. One is I grew up in a very middle class Indian household. So a lot of what you're saying is aspirational for me. So when you see something like a H&M or a Zara and you're coming from really limited means, you suddenly are like, oh my God, I can be like those who I aspire to be for a fraction of the price. I'm not even thinking about the sustainability of that, right? So that's why my comment earlier about a lot of pressure on the consumers to do better, and that's why I think some of the non-Western societies are making a mistake to really imbibe the wrong things by saying, the value system or whatever is wrong. And we forget that there's a lot, Dana's comments on just repairing your shoes. We forget that those kind of things already exist in our society.
Yeah.
And because of this sort of good communication from the companies, we're totally forgetting that. So I think a lot, and organizations like yours can really help some of the smaller artisans as well to come, there's French fashion is like the highest level that there is. It has so much power and privilege, and to sort of support these smaller artisans, give them a space. I don't know if money can go into R&D, but also just giving them a really valid and credible space for the public to see that this is something you can do, and you don't have to buy H&M and Zara. Just I don't know. Simply, this is a really random idea, but can you sort of give some sort of incentive to cobblers in Paris so that more people are repairing their shoes?
Right.
I had such a hard time. When I came to Paris the first time, I had like a thing in my boot, and I was like, I'm not throwing these away. I need to find somebody who would stitch it, not just glue it.
Right.
I couldn't find anyone to do it. I had to wait 8 months to fly back to India, give it to the cobbler there, who did it for me. I still have those boots. They've lasted me like a decade.
Exactly.
So just,
that's interesting, the incentive.
Educating even the common person to say, you have one store, but maybe we need to have a little more. Because right now, this is not connected to the fashion industry, but electronics. There's a whole thing of repairing.
Yes.
I actually just wrote about this in British Vogue in my August column. There's a lot of, not for shoes, but in repairs, there's a lot of online repair, like tailors now, where now it's not terribly green to keep sending everything back and forth, but they're doing it within London. There's a company called Sojo, and they'll teach you how to repair your things, but they'll also do it for you, or they'll connect you with a tailor. There's a few apps that will connect you with tailors in your area who they vetted and say they do really good work, and you can find some shops for repairing. And Paris Good Fashion. Paris Good Fashion is an association. Paris Good Fashion. Good fashion.
Paris Good Fashion.
Yeah. Paris Good Fashion. Yeah, it's an association to make fashion more sustainable until the new JO. And you can find some in Paris. You have a cartography of all.
I think more people do that.
Well, yeah, and cobblers are a dying trade, right?
Like learning, the responsibility is coming back on the consumer. You should repair your stuff.
In France, companies, all companies, French and foreign companies, pay a tax for recycling to an organization. The name is Refashion. And
in fashion?
Refashion.
Right,
Refashion. And now a part of this tax is reserved on repairing. So we hope and we think this way will be more and more important in next few years.
I mean, first thing you mentioned that there's a power of lobbying as well with your organization, and if you can just, I think what the comment she made on buying minimums and just having access to supporting smaller businesses who are more committed to sustainability.
Yeah, we try to do that in our organization, of course.
I don't find that really for the home wares here, because there's so much emphasis on like what's happening in fashion, but like what I'm doing with my brand, not only am I making table linens and stuff. I mean, I grew up, I don't know why my parents were so cheap anyway, we buy the roll of Seront. When linens, you could just wash them and reuse them as opposed to like loads and loads of paper towels. And the same with the plates that I buy. Like, I'm not saying that anyone shouldn't make plates. I might make plates, but there's so many great ones out there. So I'm buying them and putting it on my site, like to resell, great glassware plates and, vintage items. So, there's a lot of the things that I look at, a lot of the startup things I've applied to, they're all for fashion. I always lose every time to something in fashion. So I get press, I do great, but when it comes to like getting some sort of support, it's always for fashion.
Yeah.
But our homes are like also what we live in.
For where there is maybe another organization in textile, UIT. I'll give you a name of a person.
Carol.
So I grew up with hippie parents, was very conscious about everything, the way that we lived. I have a store today where it's all about consuming better and less and things that last. I also used to work in fashion, so I have some great objects, pieces that I'm going to keep forever. But what I do find challenging is for my children. So we do a lot of hand-me-downs, and when we have things, we hand them down. Right. We have gone to vintage stores and bought them stuff, but sometimes it just isn't the right size and needs new shoes, and we don't necessarily have the funds. I'm running a business, and it's, limited funds, so I cannot necessarily feel like, for me, I can buy the one thing, and I know I'm going to resole my shoes, or I'm going to keep this, or I'll fix this, or things have a longer lifespan on me. The kids are growing and things. I do find it challenging to find things for my kids where I'm like, okay, I just need to get them some clothes, and where do I go?
Petit bateau. They have Petit bateau. They have second-hand. And another one. No? It's
there are other ones.
Like, I go to Monoprix as like my sort of Monoprix is not like it's, where am I actually buying? Because we do try to do all of these things, but sometimes I just have to shop for the kids, and I know it's going to last 6 months here because they're growing so much. So and then everything, like you said, jeans, used to be able to keep jeans. I would buy a pair of jeans when you were a kid, and mom would fold them, and then you unfold them when you grew, but you could keep them for like a year, 2 years. Jeans now, like my son will come home with holes in them 3 months later. It's just the quality isn't there. But for the way that they're growing, I just don't have the funds. So even though I apply this to my entire life, to my business, I've grown up like this, I do find the challenge with my children hard in terms of what can I buy for them and how, in a way that I feel like I'm not buying this fast fashion thing because I need to get something.
No, but second hand is a good way. For children, it's the best way, I think.
I need to tell you.
Yeah, because sometimes I go into second hand, but you happen to not find the right size, and then it's not what you need, and then you have to find one. I guess there's enough of an offer. You can find what you need. Yeah.
And I know I have some friends who shop on Vinted for their kids. I mean, again, I'm in the same boat as you. I haven't actually taken the greatest steps to what I do. I mean, lucky for me, our neighbor downstairs, their kid is a year older than ours. And my daughter, my daughter is sort of like androgynous in how she dresses. So both kids wear his clothes.
Yeah, we get a lot of hand-me-downs. Yeah, my kids are like fine with that, and they don't, sometimes I just have to get them stuff. And
I think no one, even I have a friend who's a strict vegetarian, and he'll talk about the reasons for, environmental reasons why this is a no-brainer. But he's like, but it's impossible to think that it's perfection at every turn. Like he's still consuming dairy. He's like, so you make choices, and you're not. I don't think any of us are going to be perfect. No. From in all of our choices, it's about trying to just do better.
Yeah.
And I think you could probably argue that you're doing pretty well. In general. So, like if there's this fraction that's a challenge for you now, it's not.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, like, because I feel frustrated. Like, why do I have to go to Monoprix and buy some? Just I need.
Well, that's the frustration.
At least I should go to Petit Bateau. You feel like it's very. You need to find better.
There should definitely be more, because I know when my kids were small before, I was really thinking much about sustainability or thinking about, like Dana, I talk about that in my book a little bit too, about just like, you cultivate your style by just like, you don't need less, kind of uniform dressing and stuff. But with kids, it's kind of like,
they burn through.
In the beginning, I was going to Zara H&M, now I haven't stepped foot in either store in
You mean when they grow in their sleep? Yeah. Wait a minute, weren't you shorter yesterday?
So, I mean, I can't really ask my kids to have a uniform, to do uniform dressing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wish all the schools were uniforms.
I know.
That would be, genius. That would save That's actually what we should lobby for. Like schools, in like public schools, to be uniforms, and the schools provide the uniforms. So it also helps with like kids who have less not being made fun of.
Yeah, but it's a real subject in France.
I think so. I was as a kid, and like everybody has.
It's funny. They got rid of them because they said it was fascist, but in fact, it's the most socialist thing you can do.
Yeah, right. It's totally
an equalizer.
Yeah.
It would be great.
Some people don't want to hear about it.
You get 3 pants, 3
It's
tops.
very
You don't
difficult
have
in
to
France.
have
It's a subject.
clothes.
No.
Then, and it's
Right.
it's a solution. I just can't.
But then I went to a school that had uniforms. The markup on the uniform was insane because only the school uniform shop sold it.
So you had to buy.
I had to buy that. I couldn't wear just any other pair of black shoes or just other. I had to wear that shirt. So buying like that, and you also outgrow that every year. That's also not the best quality because they're making it in mass.
Right. See, there's no perfect solution.
No,
If you put a good in place, dark side of it. And you have to buy the uniform, perfect, we're going to overprice the uniform.
Exactly that. And then you had to wear, like, if you wanted to wear more comfortable shoes, you had to have a letter from your parents saying she has whatever pain in her ankle. Please allow her to wear these comfortable shoes that you can walk in all day.
Focus on one kind of clothes for kids and produce them well.
Right. Well, that's asking a lot, apparently.
Well, it was 2 weeks ago in a French school. I don't know where, because of the energy economy. The town buy for students some polaire, and it was I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure it was recycled polyester. It was only polyester from Bangladesh. Children.
Great job. Great effort.
There's so many factors in France.
Couldn't have thought that one through a little bit more. No. Okay. Do we have other questions? Yes.
I think so. The conversations like this are always so interesting to you because I think we can be grounded in, like, we live in Paris, we live in New York, like places where we have a lot of access to vintage clothing, to cobblers, to to luxury goods. And I always think about my mother, who like lives in a suburban place in Southern California, and like consumption patterns there are so different, and they are shopping, maybe not at fast fashion at her age, but in stores that are kind of like really mass producing goods, and living in a place that's completely about consumption and very little about conservation. And so, I'm just wondering, like, how to distill messages like this for someone like her who has means, but might have really different consumption patterns and might kind of be shopping at a mid-range where there's like an understanding of quality, but that actually, like, these aren't clothes that are sustainably produced.
Well, the beauty of the internet is that everything is much more accessible. So you can be living, like Alabama Shannon, the place where I got that gorgeous cotton t-shirt, is in Florence, Alabama. But they have a thriving business, and they ship all over the United States and maybe all over the world, I don't know. But, and they make everything to order. There's no waste, there's no inventory. If you want something you order on Monday, you'll get it by the end of the week, but it's been made for you.
Right.
And it's made of organic cotton jersey. So there are options out there on the internet, which allows consumers who live in far-flung places to have access to things, but also companies that don't want to be based in New York and LA because it costs a fortune, and to be based anywhere and be able to service those customers all over the place. That really was an advantage, a good advantage to the internet. It does ramp up shipping, but if you're ordering online, whether it's from Amazon or it's ordering from someplace else. So if you can patronize a green company that's paying attention to human rights at the same time, all the better.
And shipping is not the most important impact.
No,
in fact,
it's a very low impact compared to everything else.
Yeah.
What is the highest impact?
The upstream value chain. It's dyeing and
polyester.
Yeah, and cotton, conventional.
And conventional cotton.
Because of water,
that 1 kilo
using of water,
chemicals thing.
And chemicals,
and polyester, which is essentially plastic. It never biodegrades. It's made of petroleum. So we're drilling for the petroleum. We're making this toxic fabric. It releases microfibers every time you not just wash it, but wear it. There was a study in London that said there's like vast microfibers just floating in the air of London because people are wearing like fleece and it's just coming off into the air, and then it never biodegrades. So polyester.
Just because at my store I've decided to. I mean, we have no plastic and everything's made in Europe. But then I feel a bit frustrated, like maybe you mentioned this brand that sounds amazing in Alabama, but I'm just like, I've limited myself because I'm trying to limit,
But there are equivalents here in Europe.
So yeah, I need to just, sometimes I think I did find them in t-shirts.
And surely you'll find them in Italy where there's this culture of making beautiful clothes and homewares and but even still in France too, there's, think local and support artisans, basically. And you can get it on the internet, as opposed to going to the strip mall.
The strip mall.
The strip mall.
Social media.
Yeah.
There's such a huge power there, right? Like just in terms of like buying second. I don't know, maybe we need some marketing minds to say maybe secondhand is not the term people want to use, vintage is better or whatever that is.
Pre-loved.
Pre-loved is one of the things.
It's chic to repeat.
I know we're in a store with like a bunch of pre-loved stores.
Yeah, there's vintage right down here, yeah. But I think also, I say this about when people think they're only, when they're seeing stories or content from people and it's all same, like it's all, I don't know, privileged, bougie women from California or something. It's like, well, you can choose to follow different voices. And similarly, you can choose to follow certain accounts, for example, that are talking about these issues. If you want to learn more and you want to sort of expose yourself to more of these conversations, you can actively do that. And I think some people forget that they do have still agency in the kinds of content they're being exposed to. And so it may take an extra step, but there are accounts that I follow that have really, illuminated certain aspects of production or just consumerism for me that, once you're thinking about it, you're like, it's very rational, that makes sense. But sometimes it's the way it's presented to you. And I think if more people better selected who they're following and the voices they're, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable for you, I think that can go a long way.
If you want to follow me,
yes,
because I talk about this stuff a lot, or I post also the articles I've written, it's at Dana Thomas Paris. And my husband said, what if we move from Paris? And first I thought, we're never moving from Paris. But if we move from Paris, I just said, but darling, Paris is a state of mind.
Yes.
There you go. You're fine.
Isn't that it's a movable feast. It goes with you wherever you go. So Dana Thomas Paris. Twitter or Instagram.
But yeah, just, and do your reading. There's a lot out there, but I think it's,
And you can listen to the podcast.
And podcasts, yours, there are,
Which is not just about fashion, but everything. This week I have Dan Barber, the chef, talking about responsibly rethinking and reinventing cuisine from seed to plate, not just farm to table.
So, there's a lot that we can access. I think, people who say, well, I don't know where to go or where to look. I think it's just...
And there's so many existing practices, right?
Sure.
Like food, for example, I think what indigenous communities are doing is something
absolutely
we've just forgotten.
Yeah.
And it's still happening.
In fashion, you can also the podcast Nouveau Modèle.
Nouveau Modèle.
Nouveau Modèle.
Write this down.
And you can the good goods also.
The good goods.
The good goods.
Yeah.
Nouveau Modèle.
And the good goods.
And the good goods.
And Dana, what's yours called?
The Green Dream. The Green Dream with Dana Thomas. And do make sure you put the Dana Thomas one, because there's one in Australia.
Okay.
It's called The Green Dream. It's about money.
Oh.
Well, I'm conscious of everyone's time if you have to get to an office or your day. So it's 10:40. You've stayed a while. Thank you very much for coming out. And I hope this gives everyone a little bit of food for thought. And maybe we'll change the way they shop during this holiday season, as like the first next big shopping moment. Give experiences, give antiques, a further life. Whatever, there's ways to do it differently. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. And thank you for your time.